Hello, and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Today, I want to talk about something online that kind of raises my defense lawyer senses. When you do criminal defense, one of the things you're often called on to do is there's an allegation, and you have to figure out gaps between what the Crown's evidence has and where they need to get to prove it. So that might be to say, listen, you can't prove that it was my guy. But sometimes that's you can't prove the event actually happened at all. So with that in mind, you see lots of files, you start looking for certain things. You start developing sort of a BS sense. And I was seeing something on Twitter. Chris Biddle was posting, last night while my family and I were sleeping, someone came onto my property to vandalize my car. This was clearly an attempt to intimidate me and my campaign. I'm disheartened to see this, but I know this isn't who we are as a community. And you can see there's this vehicle and you can see spray paint. It says, F you liberals, or what appears to be spray paint. We'll get to that. Now, the first thing I think of when I see this is kind of, how does this happen? Because I've got local candidates, there's my MP, there's people looking to challenge my MP, they're all running in my area, but I don't know where any of them live. And I certainly don't know what car they drive. If I call up, the local Liberal candidate and I say, hey, I just want to know where does he live and what kind of car does he drive? Just curious. I get told to go pound sand. I mean, I suspect that they refer that call to the RCMP right away. I don't know how you get this information. So this kind of suggests to me that there's already a bit of a weird thing here. He says that this is clearly an attempt to intimidate him and his campaign. But it seems to me that the number of people who would have the knowledge to target his vehicle in specific has got to be a fairly narrow pool. So is this a friend of his? Is this a coworker? Is this a colleague? I don't know. Now, there's enough details in this picture that I could probably now figure out where he lives, but let's not do that. However, there are some things that I do want to look at in this picture. And so we're just going to zoom in a little closer here. So we can see one thing that I note, and this, I'll admit, this is an assumption, but I think it's an assumption that's fairly grounded here, is that there doesn't appear to be any other damage. And I say it's an assumption because we don't have pictures of all four sides of the vehicle, but we've got an MP who's using this as a, look, I've been attacked. This is clearly, I've been wronged. And so given that, it seems to me that it's a reasonable assumption that if there was additional damage, he'd have showed us that. And I find that to be a little odd because if you're ticked off at somebody, it's rarely that they do one thing. There's all sorts of other things you can do to a car. You can go and, start hammering at the paint. You can knock off the mirrors. You can slash tires. You can all sorts of things. But here, they're really kind of restrained. They just do the spray paint thing and then leave, apparently. And they do it in a really convenient spot because that doesn't stop you from driving. Why wouldn't you do this across, say, the glass, particularly, say, the windscreen, where it's going to be much, much more of a pain? This already kind of seems like a weird vandalism to me. It seems strange. It doesn't fit with my expectations and my experience of what people do when they're angry at their exes or angry at their neighbors. Now, there's another thing that I noticed, and that is that the paint patterns here are a little unusual. There's a few different places, and I'll sort of point to what I sort of identify as three separate textures, three separate patterns. And so the first is if you look at the F, and I'm not sure how to get a cursor on this. I'll see if I can sort of highlight this somehow later in post-production. But where it starts out, there's actually this thick part. And you can see it's got a thickness to it. It's got a depth. There's a little bit there that's sort of flaked up in some fashion. So that's unusual because that's kind of hard to do with spray paints. We'll get to that a little further. Also, we can see there's some sort of crisper lines where there's some blown over spray, but the lines sort of hold together. And then later we have wider sprays. You can see on the L, there's a little bit of that sort of thick chunkiness that happens again. But the other sort of thing that leapt out at me is that there's no drips here. I don't see any sort of runny drips. And I don't think I've ever seen an instance of spray paint vandalism that wasn't like you'll see people who are sort of graffiti artists who are putting up art, but when you see this kind of tagged message, it always seems to have drips. It always has runs. It always has, you know, little bits of overspray or underspray. And here, not so much. It's a very unusual pattern from what I can see. So that's going to let us do some playing around to see, can we replicate this? And if so, what with? And given that we have these kind of three distinct texture patterns, we can try playing around with different substances and see if we can replicate these three patterns. Now, some people have said, hey, they spray painted or sprayed out the license plate. And I'm not entirely clear, because when I look at this, I think it's possible that's spray on the plate, but it's also possible that that's digital editing. And quite frankly, the people, you know, posting this picture would have every reason to do the digital editing. So I'm not going to put any weight on that. You know, some people have said, hey, why would they spray the plate? You know, that shows that it's something else going on. I'm just gonna call that one a wash here. So there's already, I've got some sort of things I'm curious about, but what we'll go to next is I bought a whole bunch of different spray paints and wanted to try testing them out to see if I could replicate what's going on here, just to do some little practical testing. All right, let's see what we have. So the original audio is no good, but I've got a vehicle panel here just so that we can test it out on actual vehicle paint. And this is just bog standard indoor-outdoor household spray paint that we're starting out with. Now, the first thing I noticed when I tried to do this is I was trying to do that initial sort of heavy, thick, get some thickness on it with some depth to its spray. And the spray paint just doesn't do that. It runs instead, and those little lines don't look right. The further away lines, they don't quite match. They don't get that same sort of speckle pattern. So I'm saying it's not household spray paint. The next thing I figured is that somebody might actually use paint that's intended for automobiles. So this is automotive spray paint that we're trying here. And right away, I noticed that this stuff just was not the stuff. That thick, heavy initial part of the F, which I think is really our sort of critical distinguishing element, you can't do it. But even the spray on the sort of the further away spray, it's the wrong pattern. Everything about this is just not right. It's not automotive spray paint. So there we go. So this is the white high build primer filler. Let's see how this does. A little more thickness, but really runny. Oh, and this has got a very distinctive pattern to it. Definitely not the primer. It can't get the thickness, and even on the narrow lines, it runs, and at a distance, not the same pattern. This, not our thing. This is very much the wrong pattern. It drips and runs off this, like really thin. You might be able to get a thick coating with if you had a weak, but it runs. You can't do those sort of lines. This line is actually much crisper. You don't have the exterior, but you can't get the same spray patterns. It's way different. So Plastidip is ruled out. Get here. This one's actually The only thing this one doesn't really do well is the larger things. It actually does not bad on the thickness. So far, this is our closest. So the last thing I wanted to try was some fake snow. Now this is a can of fairly old fake snow. I don't know if that affected things. But the first thing I noticed is that this was the only thing that really gets the bulk that you see. It also looked really similar on both the close-up and the further away sort of spatter pattern lines. This one wasn't perfect, but it was by far the closest out of all of the things I tried. And it's not in this video, unfortunately, but later what I tried was taking this and actually misting it with a little bit of moisture just to try to simulate some dew. And that actually got that sort of F pattern a little better, because right now it's still a little chunky, whereas the original picture is smooth. So this is, I think, the closest by far. So after all of that, do we have a smoking gun? Something where I'm confident enough to say it was Colonel Mustard in the salon with the rope? And I'm going to say no. Notwithstanding the fact that the fake snow comes really close, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't sort of one of those things where it's striking in its perfection. It was real close, though. Now, fake snow comes in different brands, and those different brands may have different textures. And this is also some really old fake snow, so I don't know if any of those things affected it. I don't have enough here to say definitely what did happen. But I am pretty sure that this is not a spray paint kind of product. None of the spray paints I tried were able to create that sort of depth or thickness. So the spray paints don't match. I don't know exactly what this is, but I'm really curious to find out. I was actually curious enough that I sent an email off to the media inquiries group for the Niagara Regional Police Service, and the response back that they sent me was, "Good afternoon. Officers with 1 district, St. Catharines, are aware of a reported incident of vandalism in St. Catharines overnight that is currently under investigation. At this time, it remains under investigation. As such, we are not able to provide further information," which is not super helpful. I am kind of wondering a little bit about the language, and I see that they say a reported incident. They don't say who reported it. So I wonder if that means that it wasn't reported by Mr. Biddle, but I can't say for certain. It's possible either way. So this is all a little strange. I would like to have some more information. And Mr. Biddle has not posted any updates. He hasn't shown anything like this is what it's costing me to fix or anything along those lines. So I'm real curious about this. And the timing of this whole thing is such that we're not going to get any additional information before the election is over. So I'm curious, and I'm going to be kind of following up to see if we get any further information on this one. As I said, I can't say for certain what it is that's going on here, but I do have some questions that leave me with some doubt. I have some issues. I'm wondering what's happening here. It would be really nice to get some additional information to say, you know, here's what the damage was and here's what it cost to fix, or, you know, anything along those lines. A police report, say. So I can't say for certain, but I did my best to try to test this out. Ultimately, I would say that my answer is inconclusive, which I know a lot of people are probably not super happy about, because there are a whole bunch of people who were really hoping that I'd come out with, you know, something that says absolutely this is what it is. But that's not how things go sometimes. You got to try your best and see what goes on. And quite frankly, I would be doing you guys a disservice if I said, hey, we have a perfect match. I think it's pretty close, especially when it sort of got wet. But I can't really replicate morning dew 100%. I can't say for certain. Anyway, thank you for watching. I thought about just saying, hey, you know what? I don't have a firm answer here, so let's bin it. But there were a lot of people kind of wondering and wanting to hear the final results. So I thought I kind of owed it to everybody to say, here's what things are at the end. So I want to thank you for watching. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters at the $50 level: Jonathan Wheeler, Jason Elliott, Canada's National Farms Association, Mike, Kyle Martin, Jean-Guy Toussaint, Ivo Nedev, the CCFR, and the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. At the $30 level, Sights and Arms Limited and Marc-Olivier Damour. And at the $20 level, Raymond L. McKinnon, Matt Ward, Mark Whittington, Jane Babe and Luxor, Dale Nesbitt, Cameron Johnson, Bruno R., and Andrew Elsich. So let me know in the comments what you think. As I said, I'm not 100% certain on this one, but yeah, I have some questions. We'll go with that. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope this has armed you with knowledge, and see you next time.